All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we are neutrally breaking down a truly historic and highly controversial national address. We're going to unpack the core premise of the speech, dive into some genuinely explosive declassified intelligence claims, and explore how all of this was used to set the stage for one very specific, sweeping piece of proposed legislation, the Save America Act. We'll be looking closely at how this act was positioned as the ultimate, necessary solution to the systemic issues alleged in this broadcast. To really wrap our heads around this major legislative push, we need to trace the exact structure of the speaker's arguments. So here's our roadmap. First, the address itself, then the 5 alleged vulnerabilities, those massive China hack claims, the proposed Save America Act, how that act actually works, and finally, the immediate public fallout. Section 1. A historic national address. So picture the scene. The speaker kicks things off by painting a picture of massive recent wins. We're talking secure borders with 0 illegal crossings in 14 months, plummeting crime rates, a booming stock market. Sounds great, right? But then, a total 180. He immediately juxtaposes this glowing report with an alleged existential crisis, claiming all of these successes are on the brink of collapse because our election infrastructure is, quote, catastrophically vulnerable. And this is where the speech goes from a standard political update to something completely unprecedented. He literally declassified intelligence documents on live television. The stated goal here wasn't to tear down confidence, but rather to earn it back by exposing and correcting 5 specific areas of concern that were gathered by a White House transparency task force. Section 2. 5 alleged election vulnerabilities. What's really fascinating is how the speaker used these 5 distinct intelligence claims to build the foundation for new laws. Let's look at exactly what was alleged. First, a massive data compromise by China. Second, active institutional cover-ups by the intelligence community itself. Third, systemic vulnerabilities in electronic voting machines, leaving them open to foreign hacking. Fourth, deeply buried domestic fraud, citing a specific FBI file on a major police raid in Michigan. And fifth, non-citizens being registered on voter rolls. To really hammer home the scale of these domestic claims, the speaker cited a specific Department of Homeland Security review. This review allegedly found that roughly 278,000 non-citizens were registered to vote in federal elections. And get this, the speaker argued that's actually a lowball number. Because certain states flat out refuse to hand over their voter files, the true scope of this specific allegation remains a massive open question. Section 3. The China hack claims. Now, let's look at the absolute biggest bombshell of the night, which centered entirely on the People's Republic of China. The claim here is staggering. The address alleged that starting in the 2020 election cycle, China pulled off the largest compromise of election data in history, illicitly acquiring 220 million U.S. voter files. That is a massive breach containing names, addresses, phone numbers, and political leanings, all supposedly handed straight to a Chinese data exploitation unit. And according to the declassified CIA intelligence, this wasn't just a one-off event. It was a calculated, multi-year operation. The timeline outlines that back in mid-2018, China's goal was just to reduce the president's votes. By mid-2019, that escalated to undermining domestic confidence entirely, supposedly even paying U.S. journalists for hit pieces. And by 2020, raw FBI intel allegedly points to China actually trying to manufacture illegal ballots. But wait, it gets even more intense. The speaker alleged that rogue bureaucrats deliberately hid this crucial intel from the presidential daily briefings. He quoted an FBI official claiming to run a, quote, shadow government, unquote, specifically to keep this China meddling under wraps. He even mentioned finding burn bags full of destroyed documents. It paints a picture of a massive, politically motivated cover-up by the intelligence community. Section 4. The Save America Act. So why drop all these apocalyptic allegations? Well, it was all utilized to set the stage for one very specific legislative solution, the Save America Act. Following the intelligence drop, the speaker demanded Congress pass this landmark bill without a second of delay. This wasn't pitched as a minor policy tweak. It was presented as an absolute, urgent necessity to stop the vulnerabilities he just laid out. This is about changing exactly how you and I interact with the ballot box. Section 5. Mechanics of the Act. Let's look under the hood of the Save America Act. How does it actually work? Well, it maps perfectly onto the vulnerabilities claimed earlier. Where the speaker alleges we currently have a system with no voter ID and millions of unverified mail-in ballots floating aimlessly around, the Save America Act introduces a stark overhaul. We're talking mandatory photo ID and strict, absolute proof of citizenship. It is a fundamental restructuring designed to block the exact types of interference alleged in those declassified documents. Furthermore, the legislation inherently treats broad mail-in voting as fundamentally corrupt. It aims to ban the practice almost entirely. The act carves out only incredibly narrow, specific exceptions for mail-in ballots: severe illness, physical disability, military deployment, or documented out-of-town travel. That's it. Section 6. Reactions to the address. As you can imagine, the internet completely exploded over this, but in vastly different ways. Online commentators had totally different takeaways. You had folks like Nux Taku looking at this strictly through a geopolitical lens, interpreting the speech as basically an economic declaration of war on China. But then you have commentators like George A. Idu, who took this intensely personally, viewing these declassified drops as the ultimate validation for their long-held beliefs about the 2020 election. Just look at the sheer shock from someone like Nux Taku. Processing the idea that China hacked 220 million files and the CIA covered it up, that is a massive pill to swallow. For many viewers in this camp, the speech triggered immediate, loud demands for sweeping criminal charges and mass investigations into the intelligence agencies. Conversely, for people who spent the last 4 years facing demonetization or social media bans for questioning election integrity, this was a profoundly emotional moment. As George Andian-Sabi expressed, seeing the White House formally cite DHS and FBI reports felt like absolute vindication. After years of being labeled conspiracy theorists, they suddenly felt heard. Meanwhile, the rollout of the speech itself became part of the story. Incredibly, the speaker explicitly called out during the address that major networks, specifically naming ABC and NBC, refused to air this primetime speech live. He didn't frame this as an editorial choice. He framed it as absolute proof of a systemic, partisan press actively covering up for the radical left to hide the corruption. So what does this all mean for us? We've got explosive intel claims about China, the FBI, and our domestic voter rolls, all funneling directly into this massive legislative push. If passed, will the strict mandates for photo ID, citizenship verification, and the near-total ban on mail-in voting in the Save America Act fundamentally and permanently reshape the foundation of our democratic process? It's a massive piece of legislation born from an unprecedented national address, and the answer is going to affect every single one of us. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.